Pastor Martin, and I am so grateful that you've joined me again tonight for the ministry of the evangelist with Pastor Dennis Martin. And I pray and trust that you will be blessed tonight as we engaged and as we go in tonight to talk about the ministry of the evangelist. I know it's going to be a blessing to you as you're coming in. So please just let me know where you're from and where you're tuning in from, what state you're coming, looking at this live from. And I know that it's going to be a blessing tonight. God bless you. I see you as you're coming in, and I'm so grateful tonight for what we're going to be sharing. God bless you. Amen. Brother Sutton, I see. Brother Monroe, God bless each and every one of you. I'm waiting for you to get in, and we're going to get started tonight. I'm not going to hold you long, but want to share with you, and I pray and trust that it will certainly be a blessing to you tonight as we are sharing this information tonight concerning the ministry of the evangelist. Do me a favor tonight as you're coming in. Let me know again where you are tuning in from, what state, and then also if you would if you would do me a favor also and hit the share button and share this with someone that they can come in. Maybe you know some other evangelists and preachers and those that are in ministry getting started. Please share this with them tonight so we can share this information and be a blessing. I know it'll bless them as they come in to gather and to get this information on tonight. So just giving you a little more time as others are coming in. And Washington, from Wilmington, North Carolina, God bless you. Sister Maddie, I see you. God bless you tonight. We are looking forward tonight. We're going to be dealing with a very important subject, and I think it's going to be a blessing to those that will hear it tonight. And so I want to give everyone a little time, and might be some that are watching that we may not see them, but we know they're watching, and we want to just share with them tonight and be a blessing to them concerning the ministry of the evangelist. Tonight we are streaming on 3 different platforms tonight. We're streaming here live on Facebook, and then there are those that are watching us on YouTube. And then we're also, we've up and running. We're still working on it with our website, dlmartin.org. We're also streaming there. And you can also go there and sign up for video emails that you'll get from me, that I'll be sharing different things concerning the ministry of the evangelist even there. So I want you to do that. And I'm so encouraged. Many of you have reached out to me, and there's so many that have reached out as far as that have watched the rebroadcast of these particular sessions. And they've reached out through emails and texts and said, Pastor Martin, what a blessing you've been to share with us. And it is my endeavor to share with you that you will be able to receive and be blessed by what you're hearing, and knowing that it's helping somebody is a blessing. That is the main purpose for why we're doing this, is to help those that are getting started, those that maybe you're already doing it, but you need to just be refreshed. But those that are getting started that need to know, how do I get started? We talked about that the first session, how do I get started? And we talked about the purpose and the call of the ministry of the evangelist. We talked about maturing. We talked about development. We talked about growth. And so tonight we're going to talk about what evangelists should do. But before I get started on that, I want to just share. Got some questions that came in last week that I saw after the broadcast from Brother William Galden, and he was asking some questions. I want to answer them questions on the front end. Then we're going to plunge right into tonight's lesson, tonight's information that we'll be sharing with you. Well, he asked, do you need a license to become an evangelist? Well, there are a lot of people that that evangelists don't have a license. But in the organization that I'm a part of, the Church of God in Christ, of course, you do need license, or you should have license, because it makes, in my estimation, it makes you legit when you have the backing and you have those that can say that he or she is a part of what we are and what we're doing. And so it is important that you would have, someone said, well, I don't need a license to do that. But when you go driving in the state, they require a license for driving. They require a license for marriage. They require a license for a whole lot of stuff. And so it's important that you would get something that will make you where they can say, well, he or she is a part, and it makes you accountable. And so I think that's important for us to do that. They ask, how do you get a license to become an evangelist? Well, in the Church of God in Christ, it is important that we go through the protocol. And if you're going to be an evangelist, you need to go through the leadership. First of all, you need to begin at the local church where you are. You're a pastor. They need to know that that's what you feel the Lord has called you to do, to be an evangelist. And it starts there, and then it goes up through the jurisdiction, through your bishop, and then it goes up to a national level. I don't think it's a good thing, and I'm talking Church of God in Christ now, and even for those of you that are not Church of God in Christ, I don't think it's a good thing if you're going to be an evangelist to go around the process. It's always good to go through it and to follow the protocol of which have been established in your church or your ministry or wherever you're a part of. But it's important that you go through the leadership and make sure that you do that. Next question was, can you sell merchandise as an evangelist? Of course you can. You can sell merchandise. There are people that sell merchandise all the time. But one of the things, if you're traveling and you're going to be selling merchandise, it's always good to know up front, wherever you're going, if you can, or if it's allowable, if they will allow you to sell it. You just don't take it that you can go in and sell stuff. If you got your own auditorium, if you got your own hotel where you're doing stuff, that's fine. But if you are going to be in somebody's church, you need to understand that you need to find out ahead of time those things that you need to do. Then it was asked, is it okay to record yourself so pastors can hear your message on YouTube or Facebook? Well, it's fine to record yourself. And, sometimes a recording doesn't do you justice, but it's okay to record and to put your stuff out there so somebody can hear it or whatever it may be. But understand that, again, it's okay to do that. It's all right to put it out there, but you also want to make sure that you're putting forth something that's of quality, something that will sort of make you not stand out, but represent you well as you're putting these things out. And so that's important to do that. And so I want to make sure that you understand there's nothing wrong with doing it, but just make sure that that's something proper that you do. I think the last question that he had was, what are some of the gifts of the evangelist? An evangelist has many gifts, and there are different ones that have many gifts as they go out to minister. Some evangelists are great exalters. There's some that are, I wouldn't say gifted, but they're anointed for souls and doing altar calls and various things. And so there are a lot of gifts that God gives, and you would have to just really pray to find out where you would stand and where your gift would come into play as you're doing the ministry of the evangelist. Well, I'm not going to hold you long tonight. Let's jump right into this and get started. And I pray that as we go about tonight, if I say something that's blessing you, something that you can agree with, I pray and trust that you will type amen or show me some love as we go through this lesson. Well, tonight I want to talk to you very brief about what the evangelist should do. A lot of times when you start out as an evangelist, unless you've been trained or mentored, sometimes you don't know what to do, because many times people that are evangelists, sometimes they've been at a local church and they watch the pastor, but they have not necessarily been a part where they have been an evangelist or where they have traveled and ministered at a church. And so when they don't have that opportunity, and they may go out to preach every now and then, but when you become maybe full time or you go out more, there's some things you need to know what you need to do. And then next week, we're going to deal with some things you don't need to do. But today, we want to deal with what the evangelist should do. And so as you're looking at this, as you're watching me on YouTube, as you're watching me on dlmartin.org, as you're watching me on Facebook, I want to share with you these things that you should do. It's going to be a blessing to you to hear it as we share it. So let's get into this. I want to tell you that the first thing, and this is going to be somewhat very simple. It's elementary in a way, but you'll be surprised, as elementary as it may seem, there's a lot of people that don't do it, and they don't understand, sometimes because they watched others, or they've listened at others, or they've tried to mimic others to find out, I'm going to do it this way, I'm going to do this. But I want to share with you, there's some things that you should do as an evangelist. And we're going to run through these, and we're going to make sure that we deal with them thorough, but I want to help you out tonight. The first thing evangelists should do when you go into a place and ministering, whether it's at a church, a local church, if the pastor invited you, and even if he had someone to invite you, the first thing you should understand is you should push the pastor's vision and preach the people to God and the pastor. You should push the pastor's vision, and you should preach the people to God and their pastor or leadership, because it's very important. When God gives you to do these things as an evangelist, you should not go in to establish your own thing and what you want to do. You are there for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, and you're going in to preach the people to God. You want to bring them in closer to their relationship with God. And then you want to encourage them toward the pastor's vision and toward what the pastor is doing at that local church. So often we get into a lot of things, but we don't push people toward the leader. We don't push people toward leadership. And so I want to encourage you, if you're just getting started, learn that you are there for the purpose of helping the church, helping the pastor, not hurting the pastor, not hurting the church, but to help the church. So if you're going to help the church, then you must push the people to God and push the people toward leadership. You've got to go in to preach, to reach. You're seeking souls to be saved where you're preaching. So you should encourage the members about soul winning. You should encourage them about the vision, because every leader needs someone to come in and help them. Many times when you go in to help the pastor, what you're doing as you're ministering, as you're preaching, if you understand that you're there to be a help, your ministry should help the leader, should help the pastor, then what happens is you'll find there's some things that he's been saying that they've heard him say, but now you come in and say it, and it's like a light bulb goes off, like they've never heard it before. And all pastors have experienced that, where, they come in and say, well, I see you, Pastor Gallen. They come in and say, well, oh my God, something just hit me tonight, Pastor. I'm ready to work. Well, he's been saying that all the time. But the problem has been, they didn't hear it. I always tell these little stories, and you just have to bear with me. But I never forget one time, I over 17 years, I had an opportunity to preach for one of the, I thought and still believe, one of the greatest biblical preachers that I've ever met, and that was the late Bishop G. Patterson. And I never forget one time asking Bishop Patterson, why do you invite me to come down there and preach? And this was his response to me. He says to me, he said, Dennis, there are people that will hear you, that hear me every week, but you can say something to them, and when you say it, it's the same thing I've been saying it. But when they hear it from you, what they're going to do is they're going to respond to what you said. And so you have to understand that you're there to help the leader. Remember that. You're there to help the church. You're not there for any other purpose but to help the church. So you should go in to seek to encourage the members to support the pastor's vision. Number two, The next thing you should do as an evangelist, and this may seem to be a little elementary, but let me help you out anyway because many people still don't do this. Always respect the pastor of those he's left in charge of the service, for he's entrusted you in his pulpit and his flock for you to run a revival, whether it's for a week, 2 days, 1 day, one night revival, and you have to respect what that pastor says. I know you're the evangelist. I know you are anointed. I know God is in your life and you got the glory on you and the power. But you have to respect the leader and respect the pastor. And even if the pastor's out of town, you got to respect those that he's left in charge. What do you mean? You've got to respect what they say, because now every church is different. This is one of the things I want to share with you. As an evangelist, every church is not the same. Every place you go to do revival is not the same. Every place you go to minister is not going to be the same. Some places are totally different, and every place is different. Every church has their own flavor. Every pastor has his own things that he does. And so you understand, when you go in, you've got to respect that pastor. Sometimes you're going to a church and the pastor would tell you what time to be out of church. Does that mean that you are not anointed? No, but he knows his people. He knows what time he wants to be out of church, and he'll tell you what time he's putting you up and what time he wants to be out. And you have to respect that. I've been to churches. I remember preaching for Bishop Patterson one morning, and he said to me, he said, "I'm getting ready to put you up." He said, "You've got 20 minutes. I think it was 20 or 25 minutes to preach. Well, I preached in 15 and gave him 5 back. When I went to preach for our presiding bishop now, Bishop Blake, he said, "I've heard a lot about you, Brother Martin. I'm glad to have you here, but I want to tell you that you've got so many minutes to preach." And then after you preach, he said, because if you preach too long, it's going to throw my next service off. And so I didn't get offended and get upset. I respect it because they know their church. They know their servants. So it doesn't take away from your anointing. You just got to know not to do certain things. And so I respected that. The time, you got to respect when you go to a place concerning offerings. Some people, they may tell you not to take the offering. Don't get offended. They may tell you to take the offering, or they may tell you, "We don't want you to take offering a certain way." Learn to respect it because they know their people. I never forget, I preached for a church in Virginia, Pastor Caruth. And Pastor Caruth, when I would go and he would pick me up, he said, "Brother Martin, I'm glad to have you here." And I preached for him for many years. And Pastor Caruth would say to me, he said, "I want you to know I need to be out of here. We need to be out of church at 9:30 or 9:45. That's what he told me. He said, "I'm going to put you up in plenty of time to preach." He said, "When I put you up to preach, we need to be out of here at a certain time." And then when he got through saying we need to be out there at a certain time, Pastor Caruth, if you know him now, you know a lot of times as preachers, we just got a habit that we want somebody to touch somebody, touch this, touch that. You know how we do it. But anyway, Pastor Caruth said, he said, and he wasn't talking to me directly, but he was just saying it. He said, "I just don't like preachers that's always touching somebody. I just can't take it." And but and I'm an evangelist, so I wasn't pastoring, so I'm there, and I'm just about to get somebody to touch somebody, and in my mind while I'm preaching, I hear Pastor Ruth said, I just don't like that. So I had to find something else to say in this spot. Why? Because I have to respect what that pastor wants in his pulpit. So if you're going to be an effective evangelist, if you're going to be effective, you've got to respect what the pastor says. And even if you leave somebody in charge, you've got to respect what they say. You can't just do what you want to do in another man's pulpit. So respect. Somebody type respect for me because that's important. You must respect the pastor. Never go in and let people make you disrespect leadership while you're running revival. Don't get beside yourself because they've invited you. They've entrusted you. You don't have, I know you're the evangelist, and even people might have come to hear you preach, but you don't have a building. You don't have any people there. Everything you're doing is because the pastor has entrusted you to be there. So you must respect what he says. Next thing, the evangelist should be a person of integrity. If you've got the call of God on your life, and we're people of integrity, we've got to be people of integrity. We must be honest and sincere, and God will bless you and people will respect you. The Bible in Psalms 15:4 simply says, "Does he that sweareth to his own hurt and change him not?" Sometimes you've got to make sure that when you're doing things, that you're not just throwing things out. You have to have integrity. You've got to have about you. That should be one of the things that you really want, is integrity as you go about ministering as an evangelist. You need that. It's very important that you do that. Very important that you understand that you have integrity. Integrity is something that you're going to need if you're going to survive. Now, I know today that that's sort of gone out the window, and all the rules have changed since I was an evangelist. There were just certain things you had to do. You couldn't do any other thing. You had to do it that particular way because you had to have integrity when it came to the pulpit. Now you can do anything and people still invite you. But when I was coming up, one thing could close 10 doors on you. One thing could close 20 doors on you. And you would be like, where am I going? Integrity. It's all about having integrity. So evangelists should make sure that it's one of the things. I want to tell you that the only thing you have besides your anointing and with your ministry is a good name. And you've got to guard your name. You got to guard your name. You can't let your name, my late bishop used to say, you can't have a lot of rags and tags behind your name. You got to guard your name, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that you're going to have, because people will respect you if you've got a good name. If you work on making sure that you've got a good name and do those things. And so I want to share with you, integrity is very important. I'm going on through here tonight, and I pray that you're getting some out of this. The next thing evangelists should do is always find out what he or she should do or should not do at the church where the doors have been open for you. You should always find out. Never take it for granted that you can do in this church what you did in the last church. Never take it for granted that you can do in this revival what you did in the last revival. You need to know, even though they've invited you, and sometimes they didn't invite you, sometimes people pushed and called so much to people just said, come on. But when you get there, either way that you do it, either way, you should find out. Sometimes you have the little sessions before you go out to preach, and you're in the office with the pastor. Sometimes you should ask if it's something that you feel you want to do or something you feel that you're being led to do. You should ask, can you do that, or is it proper to do it at that church? Because it may be something that they don't practice at that church, or they don't do at that church. Never take it for granted that when you get to a church and you're asked to do something, never take for granted that when you get there, what you did at over there at the last church, you had a line and it ran all the way out the door. So when you had the line, you felt when you got to the next church, I'm gonna do the same thing. Well, you get to this church and this pastor may not believe in having lines at all. He may not want you to stand nobody up in no offering line. He may just want you to ask for the money and just let them bring it freely. He may not want you to have 30 people to stand up with $100. He may not want you to have 30 people to stand that. And if that's his rule, then you have to respect that. But you need to know that before you go to do it. And this is important. I know that sounds elementary. It sounds like, what? That's not really, but believe you me, that can either keep the door open or close the door. So you need to be able to find out, what should you do? Not just in offerings, what should you do? I never forget years ago preaching at a church locally. One of the larger churches here was Church God in Christ. It was a big church. And I'll never forget, the pastor heard a tape of me, and some people wanted me to go preach. And so he heard the tape and he said, oh, I like him. I'm going to invite him over. And I did 3-night revival, never forget it. And one of his rules was, he said, tell him when he preaches, and he had his administrator to tell me, he said, tell him when he preaches, I don't want him to get into any doctrinal stuff. Don't preach about doctrine. Just come and preach and lead the doctrine teaching to me. All right. Then the second thing he said was when he makes the altar call, he can make the altar call and then he can pray for them at the altar, but then turn them over to my people, and my people will take them in another room and deal with them, finish dealing with them about salvation. Well, I did exactly what he said, made an altar call. The altar call was filled with people. Then I prayed, then turned them over, and people got saved. I didn't argue with the fact. I didn't get an attitude about it. Those were the rules of that house. Every church is different. Every church has different rules. Every church has something different that they do. Nobody does the same way. And so you have to know that before you go in, because if you don't know that and you don't have an understanding of that before you get there or while you're there, then you'll just take it for granted that you could do what you did in the last place. Everybody is different. Every pastor is different. Every church is different. Even if they got the same, if they're part of the same organization, that's part of the same Reformation, everybody is different. Everybody does something different. And as an evangelist, if you're going to be successful, you need to know that. And I say again, it doesn't take anything away from you because you do that, but it just gives you to understand that I want to get a clear understanding of what I am to do, what I can do, and what I can't do. And then once you get those lines and things established, then you won't have any issues and you won't have any problems. So I want you to do that. So it's important for us to understand that that it is an important thing. Find out what you should do. Find out what you should not do. Over these 41 years of ministering and over like 20, almost 30 years of full-time evangelist, I've been to churches where they would say, you can do this, but you can't do that. Or you do this and don't do that. And whatever they said, I didn't get upset because my purpose was there to minister to the people. And so whatever their rules were, that's what I followed. That's what I did. And so once I did it, I was always able to go back because it did not affect the message or the anointing. So you have to be able to find out what you're going to do. And I want to say that, I want to stress that to evangelists, those that are listening, those that are watching, those that will watch. It's important that you do that. It's important that you do that. This will help you. Believe you me, it will help you. The next thing is, excuse me, we are to always try to make souls our aim and not just the money. We should take time as an evangelist for souls to come to the altar to be saved. We should always make an altar call in a revival. Now, those that are here, if you agree, just put in there, type in there, it's all about souls, or show me some hearts or some things, because we should always take time for souls. As an evangelist, we have mastered the art of raising offerings. We've mastered the art of offering taking, but we haven't mastered the art of altar calls or soul winning. And we've got to go back and we have to learn that that's going to be one of your most effective things, because when people are blessed, people don't mind blessing you. When people get something, they don't mind giving back to you. So you've got to go back to the area where you will be a blessing. And the way you bless people is by the altar call. Many times you go to church today, how many times have you seen somebody in revival as an evangelist that was there a whole week and never made an altar call? I'm not talking about a praise break. I'm not talking about somebody, we dancing and the Lord's going to bless you, and then as soon as you get through, you go right into the offering. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about totally ministering. I remember, and I share with you stories. I remember preaching at Glad Tidings in California, Bishop Macklin, our second assistant presiding bishop. And I never forget preaching for him. And while I was preaching, he said these words to me. And I listen to what people say, because it means that I want to know what they think. And as the pastor, he said to me, he said, Brother Martin, I appreciate your ministry. And I said, well, Bishop, I appreciate you for having me to come. He said, no. He said, I appreciate the fact that you preached all the way through and then dealt with souls at the end. And then you took your offering. He said, because most people that come, he said, you can tell when they take a turn in the middle of the message that they're turning toward the offering. And so that said to me that he's paying attention to what I'm saying. And he paid attention to the extent that he knew that I didn't take a turn in the middle of the message to go toward an offering, but I was focused on winning souls, making an altar call, and then taking the offering. Sometimes we even rush through altar calls just so we can get to the offering because we're afraid people are going to leave, and I don't want them to get out here with the money. Understand, if you anointed, if you bless people, I'm telling you, people will stay to the end. If you bless them, if you anointed, if you're dealing with the altar, there's some folks going to stay right there, and your anointing and the glory of God on your life will cause people to be a blessing. So I want to encourage you that whatever you do, learn that money should not be the aim. Don't go in just thinking money is my aim. No, bless the people. And then once you bless people, people will bless you back. And so understand that that's one of the focus. And then we've got to learn how to go back to making altar calls. I know that a lot of times we think that the praise break is the altar call. It's not. Sometimes you've got, even after the praise break, you got to stop and you've got to give people an opportunity. When we do altar calls, I love to talk. We love to even sing songs to bring people's mind toward the altar call. Bishop Richard White, Mr. Clean, sings a song, There'll Never Be a Better Time Than Now. Bishop Paul Morton sings that song talking about coming to the altar. And so when we start dealing with things just to turn people toward salvation and turn them toward the altar, because you never know who's sitting there, that this may be their last opportunity to receive Jesus Christ. And you don't want to be guilty, and I don't want to be guilty as an evangelist and not giving people an opportunity to be saved. I never forget once I was in Florida, and I preached every night in Florida, and I made altar calls every night. And one young man, he never came to the altar. He just sort of sit in the back, but I made the appeal. And on the last night of the meeting, the pastor called me and said, I'll be late. And he said, you remember the young man that was sitting in the back? You remember the young man that served you, I think it was that Wednesday night? I said, yeah. He said, well, he just got shot, and they found him in the street in a fetal position, and we're going to the hospital to check on him. And he said, I want you to, to pray. And so before the service was over, they called me back and said that he didn't make it. So I made an altar call that night for the young people. And then his mother asked if I could come back and do his homegoing service. And the pastor allowed it to be so. And I came back. And at the homegoing service, I made an altar call. And young people got saved. We've got to go back as evangelists. You should always make an altar call at your church. You should always make an altar appeal in your revivals. It should be one of the things that you do not close the service out without making an altar call. All right? I'm hurrying along here, just about there. So if you got that, it's important to make altar calls. I feel I need to just stress that a little bit tonight, that evangelists should make altar calls. You shouldn't go to a revival and be there all week and never make an appeal for souls. Never make an altar call. Not as an evangelist. That shouldn't be. That should be one of the things that you make sure you do, is make an altar call. All right. Next thing is the church that you're going to, an evangelist should get a good understanding before arriving to the revival about the finance of the revival. Now, this is a topic that you hear a lot of people get into, but we're going to get into this some more because this is going to be just a whole subject by itself. But tonight I want to throw it in that you should find out before you get there what the financial arrangements may be as far as you preaching. Someone said, well, if I ask that, they're going to think it's all about money. No, you just want to know what's the financial arrangement when it comes to what you're going to be doing. So that way there's no surprises, because understand, every church, I have to keep stressing this so evangelists will get this and understand, every church is different. Every church has a different thing they do when it comes to all things, even finances. There's some churches, they're going to do different things, and you got to understand that you need to understand it. Now, let me tell you something that happened to me years ago, and this is true. I went to preach at a church. I won't say what city it was in, what state, but I'm just going to tell you I went to preach. And I didn't know what the financial thing was, and I just went to preach and everything. And so we came to the end of the revival, almost the end of the revival. The pastor said, he said, well, we're going to, I started Sunday morning. I want you to get this. I started Sunday morning. I was there Sunday morning, Sunday evening. I think we took Monday off. I was there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And he said, well, I'm going to, and every night I'm taking offerings after I minister. He said, and so we're going to bless the preacher on Friday night. So I'm like, okay. And so I took the offering. They took the offering Friday night to be a blessing to me or whatever. Now, here's the part that I was not expecting and I didn't know. Now, I did go back to preach again, but the next time I knew. I think it was Friday night was my night or Thursday night or whatever. But then the pastor said to me when we got in the back, when they gave me the offering, and he said, well, this is what was raised. He said, and this is the three-way split. And I said, okay, the three-way split, what does that mean? He said, well, the church got their part, you got your part, and I got my part. Now, understand, I had never heard of that before. I had never heard of it, had never seen it, didn't even know that even exists. But that's what he told me. So I was like, okay. And I didn't argue with him and went on. And I was like, wow, I never heard of that before. But then I went to another place, and I was going. They invited me, and I went, and I didn't know how they did their finance. I'm just an evangelist, just going to preach and just letting the anointing be great and stuff. And so the pastor said to me, he said, well, we're going to take time. We're going to bless the preacher on Thursday night. I think Thursday night was my night. They blessed me, and I took offerings all week, but the only night that they blessed the evangelist was on Thursday night. And, and so if you don't find out what the financial arrangements are before you go, you may end up with a surprise. So if you understand what they are, what the financial arrangements are when you go there, then you won't have no thing where you go on and say, but they did me wrong, they didn't do me right. Understand there's nothing wrong with asking and taking care of business before you get to a place. That's important. Again, I stress that everybody is different. There's some places you may not even have to ask. There's some places you may have to ask. Now there's a little difference there, but there's some places you don't. There's some places you definitely got to ask. And I'm gonna throw this in just for free. We'll deal with this another time. You have to understand, as an evangelist, you always have to know if you are ministering possibly for a pastor or someone that has never been on the road as an evangelist, then you have to understand their mindset sometimes, not all of them, but their mindset about finances for an evangelist is totally different from someone that has been there, done that. Now, I've been on the road, I've been full-time, and I'm a pastor. So when an evangelist comes to me and preaches for me, sometimes, if they do good, hey, fine. But sometimes if it's a little short, sometimes I'll take the hit because I understand. I've been on the road. I've been as an evangelist, so I know how it's done. And so you got to understand. Now, you got to also understand that I've been places, and I don't want to get into this really, but I'm going to get into it for just a minute. I've been places where I remember preaching one time, one place, and they gave me some groceries. Hey, you have to understand that. I went one place, they gave me a trophy. Okay, It's funny now. We're funny then because you, but you just bear it and grin it and go on. But I'm sharing with you that it's important to know that stuff before you go. It's important to know it, just so you have a clear understanding that there will not be any misunderstandings about finance. Okay, that's important to do, and it's important to know that. Um, we're getting toward the end of this because I didn't want to go over the time that I've set. The next thing is um, this here, and let me deal with this. Uh, says evangelists should stay assigned to the person that the pastor has taken care of you, no matter who you know in the city. When you leave church, leave with the person who is assigned to take you where you're supposed to go, unless you clear with the pastor. I know you got relatives in the city. I know you got people that know you and you've known them and they go to other churches. But if you are at that church and the pastor has assigned somebody to pick you up from the hotel, wherever, and make sure you get to church and get back home, back to the hotel, then you should stay assigned to the people that have been assigned to take care of you, unless that's something that you've already talked over with the pastor. Because first thing you don't want to do is you don't want your good to be evil spoken of. Okay? You don't want to be evil spoken of, because understand that everybody does not know that that's your cousin. Everyone don't know that that's your longtime friend. Everyone does not know that that's your second cousin. They don't know any of that. I never forget one night I was at the supermarket years ago, and my bishop was in the supermarket, and I didn't know he was in the supermarket, and me and my cousin was in the supermarket, and he didn't know my cousin, and of course she's a female, my cousin Melissa, and we were in the supermarket, and when he saw me, I saw the look on his face. He had this look on his face because it was about, I guess it was about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. And he had this look on his face like, uh-huh. And so I said, oh, Bishop, this is my cousin. Well, he didn't know if that was my cousin or not. And so you don't want your good to be evil spoken of. So stay assigned to the people that you have been assigned to take care of you. You in that city, stay assigned, be where you're supposed to be, do what you're supposed to do. I go back again to some things that I've learned over the years, and that's why I'm sharing these things, helping those of you that are watching, those of you that will be watching. Years ago, when I would preach for Bishop Patterson always had somebody pick you up at the airport. There was a couple of times he even picked me up himself. And so if he signed somebody to pick you up, then you would go where he had somebody to pick you up at. And so one time I was coming in, and Bishop was going to be there the next day, but whatever. And so I had somebody to pick me up, to take me to the hotel. And so when I got to service the next day, that Sunday morning, Bishop simply said to me, he said, you didn't have my people to pick you up from the airport? And I said, no, sir. I said, I had somebody just, pick me up. And he just shook his head and said, uh-huh. And so he never had to say that again. Never had to mention it again. Never had to say it again. At that point, every time I was going to the Temple of Deliverance, my thing was who's picking me up and who am I assigned to? Okay? It's important that we understand that those are little things. They may seem like they're simple. They may seem like it's stuff that don't matter, but you have to be mindful of what pastors are looking at, what people are looking at. So you got to be mindful of what you do and how you do it. You got to know that if you are assigned to somebody, if they assign you to a certain group of certain people, then you stay assigned to them. You don't just find your own people where you preach in other places. Now, there's some people, they feel that they're above those rules, and nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. I'm sharing this with somebody that may be getting started or someone that's trying to get established, to let them know these are certain things you should do. You've got to stay to whoever you are assigned to. Do what you're supposed to do, because if you don't do it, it may hurt you. It may affect you. You can't be actually, you know people, but you're an evangelist, whether you're male or female, you're in the city. People don't know who you know in the city. They don't know who's your relatives, and you're preaching at night, but they see you all over town with somebody. They don't know who that is, and you could be legit, but they don't know that's the person. So if you're going to if you need to go somewhere, most time when I go places, people they'll say, Pastor Martin, here's the number. I'm picking up at the airport, and then here's the number, my number. If you need anything, contact me. Now I know a lot of people in the city, but sometimes, most of the times, I'm using that number and calling them. If I got to go to the post office or got to go somewhere, I'll call them because I want to be able to keep in good standards, and I want my name to be good, and I don't want my good to be evil spoken of. So you got to do those things that will not affect you, and that's important. It's simple, but it's very important that you do that. And so as you go to do these things, if you're going to be an effective evangelist, I'm sharing with you tonight those things that you need to do, those things that you need to understand to be able to be effective in what you're doing. And as you do it, it's going to be very important that you go through these things. Push the pastor's vision. Always respect the pastor. Always respect leadership. Always do that. Be a person of integrity. Find out what you should do and what you shouldn't do when you go to a church. Make the souls and altar your primary goal. Believe me, if you do that, the money will come. You don't have to worry about no money. Find out, take care of the business part of it before. Let me say this, and I'm closing with this. I want to go back over understanding the finances and all of those, and we'll go back over in this next week again. But, I know today people do contracts, they do things where they, I need so much, I need this, I need that. And it's okay to find that out. But now I keep stressing this, and I want you to hear this if you don't hear anything else I said tonight. Every church is different. Every leader is different. You cannot assume that what you did before or what you even sent to somebody before will work everywhere. Because understand, when you're taking care of business, there's some people you don't send things. I was talking to a pastor friend of mine recently, and he has a big, large church here in the city. It would be considered a mega church, and we're friends. We're good friends. And his church is real big, and he's a very popular person. And he was having an event, and he invited some people to come, and the people sent him a contract. And when he got the contract, he looked at it and he started reading at what the contract says. And so he had his administrator to call them back and say, tell them that I no longer want them to come. I rescind my invitation for them to come. Because he was offended that you would send me this contract. Now, some people, they do that. Some people, in some places, they'll do that and you can send them a contract. But you got to know when you're sending it, what you're sending it for. They want you to come preach. I never forget, years ago, inviting a preacher to preach, and he's also was a singer. And I invited him to preach at a church, and I didn't know him like that. We were not friends. But I invited him to preach, and, people came to the revival, and they enjoyed his preaching, but they wanted to hear him sing too. And he wouldn't sing, he wouldn't even sing a song. He went over his mouth singing a song. I think he finally sung one the last night. And I was like, okay. And so you got to understand when you go places, you got to do that. I was preaching in another church. I won't tell you what city it was in. And the bishop at that church came, when I went in that evening, he asked me, he said, do you know this young man here? And he showed me the name and everything. I said, oh, yeah, I know him. We're friends. And he said, well, read this. And he started reading the contract, and the contract was listing all the stuff he wanted him to do and frequent flyer miles and all the kind of stuff. And so he said, I'm getting ready to call and counsel him. And because this is a nice church, y'all. Take my word, real nice church. You ain't got to go through them changes. And he said, I'm getting ready to call and counsel him because I can't believe he sent this to me. Well, I tell you what happened. I said, Bishop, don't counsel him. I said, let me call him. And I called him and I said, listen, man, you about to get counseled out. And I explained to him And he said, thank you so much for calling me. So he called the bishop, and they got it straight, and the bishop it invited him to come. And actually, the bishop blessed him better than what he was even asking for. Now, I know every church don't do that, but I'm just saying that's why I keep stressing that every church is different. You got to approach every church differently. You can't approach every ministry the same way. Even if you got bitten by one, you can't approach every ministry the same way. When I preached for late Bishop G. Patterson, he may call me on a Thursday and say, my people want to hear you Sunday. Well, I didn't say, Bishop, you gonna get my ticket? No. And I went and got my ticket and was on the plane out Saturday and just let him know what time I'm gonna get there. I never did that. Now somebody else do that that I don't know. I may have to ask them, well, this is what it's gonna take. Nothing wrong with that, but there's by case basis. Everybody is different. When Bishop, the second assistant presiding bishop, Bishop Macklin, preached for him many, many times, and go speak to him on the platform, he pulled his calendar out. He said, point some dates out to me. He said, make these work for me. That's all he said, make these work for me. He didn't, Bishop, well, who gonna get, no, make them work. I want these dates to work right here. And I remember the last time I would preach for him, he said, make these dates work. And they were like the dates leading up right to watch night service. He said, make these work. And I went on and got the ticket, and they reimbursed me for it, but I went on and got it because the bishop said, I want you here, and these are the dates I want you here. And so we have to remember that those things will happen if we are doing those things and doing the right things. And so I want to encourage you that whatever you do, that you will make things happen, make things work. Understand that it's different, case by case study, case by case basis. Understand that everything is different. So you cannot do everybody the same way. And if you do that, I promise you, take some of these things that I've shared with you tonight, I promise you, you're going to be affected. Now listen, I need you to do me a favor before I get out of here. I pray and trust that you have gotten something from this tonight. It seems like it's just basic, but it's basic that we don't do anymore. And therefore, sometimes people have not been able to get and to do the things. And if you're just getting started, don't start acting like people that's been out there a long time. Sometimes people been out there a long time can request what you can't request. They can get what you can't get. And you trying to get your foot in the door, and you go in trying to be grand, and you're going to find yourself out the door before you get in the door. And so I want to encourage you on tonight. I need you to do me a favor. I want you to share this with somebody after it's over. I need you to subscribe to me. Those of you here on Facebook, those of you on YouTube, those of you that are watching on dlmartin.org, you can go and sign up for my inspirational videos that I'll be sharing and putting out. But on next Wednesday at 7:30, I want you to be with me. Next Wednesday at 7:30, we're going to be talking about what evangelists should not do. And you got to be here for that. It's going to be a blessing. We're going to talk about it, and we're just going to be real and talk about some things that you just can't do if you're going to be effective. Well, let me put it this way. What you can't do if you're going to have longevity on the field, if you're going to last. Because here's the thing I want to share with you, and this is the last thing, and I promise I'm out. Understand, I've always said this, it don't take but one time to mess up. And you have to understand, pastors talk to each other. You can mess up in one place that can close 10 doors on you. You have to watch everything you do. You got to watch your company that you keep. If you're going to be an effective evangelist, you can't hang out with everybody because you don't know everybody. I don't know who, some people you hang out with, they may not have a good name. I remember one time going to, I was president and they had a thing going on, and I went to it, and somebody was invited that I really didn't know personally, but I knew them from ministering. And so the preacher, when he asked, he invited me to come preach at his church. And so when he saw this person, he simply asked me, he said, do you know them? I said, well, they preach for me and blah, 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 blah. And he said, oh, okay. And about 2 weeks later, uh, they called and said, we're going to have to do something different, and we're going to, cancel the revival at this time, and we'll get back with you. And that's been a couple years ago. And so when I saw him last year in the convocation, it's been that many years, but I saw him in the convocation, and I said to him, I said, let me ask you a question. And I told him, I said, when you canceled my revival and you didn't let me come, he said, yeah. And I told him why. I said, because of da 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 da. And he started laughing. He said, you smart. He said, yeah, that was the reason. I said, I knew that was the reason. I said, but I didn't know them like that. I said, but I could tell by the look on your face that you thought that some kind of way I was in association with them. And so you have to be careful as an evangelist who you associate with. You can't associate. You can't hang out with everybody. You can't be seen with everybody. It's not good for you, and it's not going to help you do the things you need to do. I pray and trust that you got some out of this tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. And don't forget, next Wednesday, 7:30, we'll be back here with the Ministry of the Evangelist with Pastor Dennis Martin. I pray and trust you got something tonight. God bless you. Don't forget, share it. Don't forget, go to my webpage. I'm still working on it, but it's up and running, dlmartin.org. Go there and sign up for my video email that I'm going to be sharing with you. God bless you, and may all God's best be yours.